we wanted to have a conversation about what we're facing in just our constituency, because in this place you can have make speeches and they're largely hyperbole and they're around issues of principle that never really get to the meat of what people are experiencing. I represent a constituency called Harlington. It's out by Heathrow, and it's a working class, multicultural community. It's always been a migrant community for the last century and a half. Different waves of migrants have come, settled, and the community rubs along pretty well together. It's a working class community that had an industrial base that's largely gone now. We're largely dependent on the airport and also on the service sector. It's usually an area of high employment and not bad wages, not brilliant wages, but high employment. We used to have a skilled sector in the manufacturing, but that's largely gone too. We're now experiencing unemployment like other areas, and we're experiencing youth unemployment on a massive scale. And we're also experiencing really savage cutbacks by the local council's Conservative control, and there's privatisation and cutbacks on a scale that we haven't really seen, even back as far as the 80s. We've also experienced in all those policies that are being pursued by this government by way of welfare benefit cuts, the bedroom tax, the impact on just the provision of public services locally. And what does it mean? Basically, we have an open door policy 4 days a week now in the constituency office. We have all the usual traditional constituency surgeries on a weekly basis, so we have the emails coming in that we've flooded on. But because people want to see you, to talk to you face to face about their problems, we've gone as an open door policy all day for 4 days a week. We shut 1 day a week just to catch up on some of the paperwork as best we can. We never do, but we try. And I just say this, and people sometimes don't believe you. We're absolutely swamped with people who are absolutely desperate, and you can come away and weep, and we regularly do. And we have a team of workers who we work together, some part-time people as well as Helen, and they work really well as a team. They're incredibly caring, but professional in what they do as well, because they deal with these problems on a daily basis over the years. But sometimes I say, look, maybe we should just get counselling for people, because we're taking it all the time. You're listening to people in desperate circumstances all the time, and at the end of the sessions, you want to sit down and just cry. People are coming to us now, some of whom are on no benefits whatsoever. None whatsoever. We've had case after case where they've been on disability benefits in the past, and have now, because of the ATOS assessment system, which you'll all know about, are no longer receiving any benefits at all. We have people who are being sanctioned on job seekers allowance for the most minor failure to comply, and some of them are absolutely bizarre circumstances in which they're being sanctioned, and they can lose benefits. Usually the benefit is lost for up to 6 weeks, but it can be up to 6 months and a number of years now in some circumstances. And it can be for not turning up at the right time at a particular appointment. Even sometimes when they're phoned in and said, well, I can't make it on that day. We've had a number of people sanctioned where they've been going for a job, but haven't been able to get to the job centre to sign on. We've got some people now who are having to be told to be signed on a daily basis, to be, again, if they don't turn up, to be sanctioned. The worst results that we're dealing with, the consequences, families with children, people with disabilities, and people in particular with mental health problems. People with mental health problems are being shredded by the ATOS system. I quoted in this place, and I don't think people believe me, we had a postal worker who was made medically retired by the post office on the basis that ATOS had done an assessment for the post office saying that he was unable to do any job within the post office, and therefore he was medically retired. Then when he applied for disability benefits, ATOS assessed him, yeah, you can guess, as ready for work. So he lost all benefits. He attempted suicide. And we've had case after case where people have just been desperately trapped within the system itself. We've got a housing crisis that we've not experienced now since the Second World War. So we have families turning up on a regular basis with all their children, desperately trying to find a roof over their heads, living in private accommodation which they can't afford. And because now of the issues around benefit caps and all the rest, already the housing benefit in my area already does not meet the rents the landlords are charging. There's already a gap between what they get in benefit and what the rent is. Now with the benefit caps and the benefit cuts coming in, it makes it even worse. And what they're told to do is when they go to Harlington Council, they're told they have to move out of the area. We've got Midlands, Southampton, Helens here, all over the country. They're told to go. What have those areas got in common? They might be low rents, but they're low rents because they're high unemployment areas. So whole families now are being churned around the country. And because, well, in most instances, the families in our area often have got a job. But they're told, because they can't make the rents, they've been told they have to move out of the area and then into unemployment, and then they get sanctioned for declining a job. It just goes on and on and on. We've got a food bank in our area that is run by a group of churches and all the rest of it, but before that we had to start up our own food bank, and also during the winter we had some community groups who were absolutely fantastic. We were, as people came in, we were giving bags of food, and we still are, but also we were giving warm clothing to children when they came in as well. I don't know whether you saw the Save the Children Fund analysis of how many children just didn't have a warm coat this winter. Well, that's a common experience within our community. We give hats and gloves and scarves and warm clothes last winter to people in our community. That's how bad it is. That is how bad it is. We've got isolated elderly now, who again, it's isolated and living in poverty, and that decision, we keep going on about it and no one listens, that decision whether they turn on the heat or whether they eat is a daily decision for many people in my constituency. It just goes on. It just goes on. And what this government has been able to do is exactly, shut up at this, and Helen can come in when she feels like it, but what is exactly what Nina has said. In the 1930s, when we went through this depression, because that's what we're in, people learned a lesson, and they learned the lesson that being poor or unemployed wasn't, as the poor law mentality told us, an individual failing. It wasn't some moral failing in the individual, because that's what the poor law attitude was, or drilled into us over 2 centuries. People learned in the 1930s, it's the system. You don't blame the individual, you blame the system. And it is about the maldistribution of wealth. It is about not planning our economy. It is about a system based upon greed and profits rather than need. And you learn lessons then, and that's how that debate about the welfare state came about. Selma and Nina were here, down in the committee room 14. I held a showing with Ken Loach of Ken Loach's film, The Spirit of 45. And it showed people who learned the lessons of the 1930s and then built the welfare state. The one gap that Selma quite rightly pointed out was Eleanor Rathbone. It didn't discuss the child care and child benefits and child support. But it demonstrated that actually people in the 1930s realised that you had to change the system. Now we're going back to the point where we get divided because the media and the politicians are blaming the individuals rather than the system. Blaming the individual for being unemployed, blaming the individual for being poor, and blaming the individual for being hungry and cold. That's what this is all about, this division between the undeserving and the deserving poor. My view now is, despite all that, people are beginning to wake up to it and fight back. And I'll shut up at this just to say I get inspired now with various fight backs that are taking place. The cleaners in the Barbican are not paid the London living wage. They're organised by a group called the IWGB. On Saturday night, they all turned up at the Barbican, marched into the music halls, the concerts and all the rest of it, shouting, "We want the London living wage." And what was interesting, the audiences applauded them. The management called the security guards and the audiences supported the cleaners. And it's kicking off all over. You know, the Sussex students occupying Sussex University, it wasn't tuition fees this time, they were supporting the workers because their jobs were being privatised. Disabled people against the cuts and Black Triangle, wheelchairs being chained together to block Oxford Street against the Atos assessments exposing what's going on. This week we had a bus worker who was suspended from work and sacked on the trivial offence, so we held a public meeting 2 days ago. He was sacked because actually he was being victimised as an active trade unionist. We demonstrated outside the office yesterday, he was reinstated. I I think what I'm saying is that we're all now experiencing what the hits that are coming against our community, but actually are being inspired by those people who just said we've had enough and we're going to fight back. And you can't. There's no point in waiting for politicians to do it. This place will only shift after the community and the whole climate has changed. And our job is to change that climate. And it's exactly. Selma's article in Comment is Free today is exactly right. We've got no other alternative but to what she says: fight like hell.
Yes.